Hey everybody, thanks for joining us this morning. I hope your Monday's off to a good start. This is Jason Drews. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at LMN. Today we're going to be going over the budget analysis section and helping with the understanding of that section in your budget. So without further ado, let's jump in and get started. So I'm just going to switch over to my LMN budget account. If you're curious how to get to this section, again, you can just get here by going to the budget section on the left-hand side of your Element account and then left click on the budget. So I've got one that I've adjusted so that the numbers are skewed somewhat, just so that you can take a look at the analysis section with me together, and we can go through some of the common questions that we get asked on support, and also, of course, go over what everything means. If you have any questions along the way, of course, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'll do my best to get to all of those. And this is being recorded, so if you want to play back later, of course, you'll have that opportunity as well. So I'm just going to go down in the budget to the analysis section, left click there. Now, just a little tip again, try to include this if you're on a smaller screen and you're going to be working in the budget like we are for a little while, you can click this 3-line icon to minimize the main menu. Just gives us a bit more room here to look at what we're trying to look at in the budget. So the first thing I wanted to go over with everybody, it was actually the budget and ratio analysis over at the bottom. So basically what this is think of it as like a advisor in your Element account, helping you out just in case the numbers aren't lining up with our industry averages. So basically, Element in the budget is going to ask you a bunch of questions if anything looks off from a ratio standpoint, to make sure that you've got all the information in the right spots, didn't forget to include anything that might have skewed your numbers, or maybe you've included something by accident in 2 places at once. So essentially, we're going to ask you a lot of questions here just to double check things. So it's like you've got your own advisor or consultant, if you will, asking you a couple questions here just to make sure everything's entered in correctly. Because a lot of the times, you might maybe put a mechanic that's working on field equipment in the equipment section rather than in the overhead section, for example. Little things like that this section here will help you out. So, my labor ratio is higher than average, so it's got some recommendations here for things to try. Do I do work for cash? Make sure we include those sales, for example, which would lower my labor ratio if my sales went up, of course. If I move down, there's some more tips for the equipment ratio section or the equipment section. This time it's lower than the average. So did I budget enough for fuel, for repairs, for insurance? Materials, so on. It's going to ask me if I included all of the material budgets. If I increased my sales, did I also increase my materials? Or if I decreased my sales, did I decrease my material budget? Common things like that. And then lastly, it's going to give us a few tips and tricks on our overhead section, as well as the profit. So if your profit's not coming out to where you want it, we do recommend that you aim for a 10% net profit. Of course, if you feel you can go higher than that, absolutely, please do. But we feel that 10% is a fair number to aim for. So we've got some recommendations there as well if your profit's not coming out to where you want it. I will add that your accounts do come with a dedicated account rep. So if you want assistance reviewing your budget, feel free to reach out to our support team for help there. And we also offer a service called Fast Track. With Fast Track, what we do is we'll take the data that you provide us and we'll upload it into the account for you, so you can be rest assured that your numbers are accurate, everything's entered in the right spot before you start estimating. So a couple options for you there. If you're interested, feel free to email us, and we will gladly send you some more information on that stuff. So moving up, back up to the top of the budget analysis section, we've got four squares here, or rectangles, that each one has a topic. So top left, where's my revenue going? That's just a breakdown of all the percentage of your costs in your budget. So what percentage of your sales do you spend in wages and equipment, materials, subs, and overhead? So fairly straightforward there. Don't have to spend too much time on that. And then we'll move over into the revenue per man hour. So the first thing you'll want to do here is enter in a percentage of unbillable hours. So what we're doing with this is we're looking at your sales goal. We're looking at how many hours that you've got in the field labor section to meet that sales goal. And we're determining what you should be charging per hour if you're to break out the total price of a job and divide it by how many hours are on that job. So we're not saying that you should be charging $73 per hour. We're actually saying that your jobs should average $73 in this case per hour to meet your sales goal. So that includes things like equipment, materials, and labor. So it's not your charge out rate, it's the total price of an estimate divided by how many labor hours you have on that estimate to come up with the revenue per man hour. So how we come up with that number is pretty simple. Just going to the field labor section, and we're essentially dividing your sales by the total number of hours that you have in this section. And then if I go back to the analysis, we're subtracting the unbillable because there's going to be some hours included in there that you're not charging your clients for. They're unbillable hours, so maybe it's shop time or drive time, depending on the type of work that you're working on. So 20% would be a good average if you're doing a mix of, design, build, maintenance, and that type of work. But if you're primarily design build and you include mobilization into your bids or travel time, that sort of thing, then maybe you'll have a lower number there because the price is not unbillable, it's billed into your work. But if you're doing a mix of work, 20% is a good number. So again, total price of your job divided by how many of your labor hours are on that job to come up with the revenue per man hour here. So again, not what you charge your customer per hour, but that is going to include things like materials and equipment as well to your labor. So moving on to the capacity and efficiency, essentially we have our sales goal here of 1,060,000. And this is essentially telling us that, hey, under perfect circumstances, based on the costs that you've entered into the budget, we have the capacity to earn 1.368 million in revenue. So the difference there being the drop in efficiency. So taking a step back, what that means is, if you estimated perfectly and all your costs came back exactly as how you budgeted it, your potential would be 1.368 mil. So how we come up with that number is fairly simple. We're taking, again, your labor hours that you have in the budget, and then we're applying the average charge out rate per hour to those labor hours. And then factoring in how much money you'll be making on overhead recovery and then on your profit as well. So if your profit was, say, 10%, we would add in the overhead that you're going to be recovering on that labor cost and then the profit on top of that. And then again, same thing for equipment, materials, subs, figuring out what the overhead recovery markup is on those items, and then adding the profit as well to come up with your theoretical capacity. So as far as how you come up with a charge out rate, it's just a simple rate that you would charge your customer for labor alone. So it doesn't include any equipment. So the way I usually kind of describe it is if I was one of your customers and I asked you, hey, since you're here, could you also do XYZ in the backyard for me? Just what would you charge me for that work by the hour? Now, if you do multiple types of work, then obviously you're probably going to have different charge out rates depending on the crew. So just keep that in mind that this is an average rate. So if you've got a design build crew where you charge out $75 an hour and a maintenance crew that you charge out 45, then it would be in the middle there between those two. So once you enter in your charge out rate, that's going to give you an efficiency rating. In my case, it's 77.4%. And sort of the area that you want to aim for, I would say typically is what we recommend, at least 80 plus. So 85 to 90, you're in really good shape. And if you're in the 70s, it's just a little harder to make profit due to the efficiency loss there. And then just to show you how that relationship works, if I were to change this number from $50 to 45, what do you think is going to happen? Now I realize you can't really answer me here, but let's take a look. So if I lower this to 45, my efficiency goes up. And if I change my charge out rate to 55, it drops even further. And the reason for that is because I haven't changed my sales goal. So I'm charging more for my work, but I'm still bringing in the same sales goal. So I've become less efficient. And that's why if I go to a lower number where I'm charging less with the same sales goal, I've become more efficient. So hopefully that explains the relationship there and how that works. So that's your capacity and efficiency. This isn't used anywhere else in the software, just in the budget. So if you're, it's really gives you a good idea, where you could improve that efficiency or how improving your efficiency could really affect your bottom line. And I'm sure we could have a whole product tip segment in the future on ways to increase efficiency. If you haven't been to one of our virtual webinars yet, highly recommend joining one of those. Great place to learn about ways to increase efficiency during one of those webinars as well. So the last point that we have here is the budget throughput. So throughput's an interesting one. Essentially what it is your costs subtracted by your vendor costs. So how much money is left over for you once you've paid your bills. So how much money is left over, but also, how well are your resources at earning revenue? So you only have so much labor that you can add into a job or apply to increase your sales. So sure, you could do some overtime, but there's going to be a point where to increase your labor, you're going to have to hire another crew. That crew is going to need a truck to get to the site, materials to do their job. So labor is an expensive resource, and we want to maximize the revenue that your labor is bringing in. So that's what throughput is. So it's going to show us on the job how much money is left over after we've paid our materials, after we've paid any equipment rentals, and after we paid any subcontractors. So what's left for our overhead, for our labor, and our equipment costs is what throughput is. To put it into an example for you, if you were only to look at revenue per hour and you had an estimate that was showing you, let's say, revenue per hour of $120 per hour, if that looked good, but the throughput was extremely low, that might be telling us that, hey, we're not going to have much revenue left over after we paid for the subcontractor. So we're paying a premium to a subcontractor, which is making our revenue per man hour look higher than a typical job would be because of the subcontractor costs. But if you look at the throughput after we've paid that subcontractor, there's really not much money left in our pocket. So if that job doesn't require much work on your behalf because you're using subs, then maybe it's still one that you want to go with. But at least it gives you that sort of insight into the job that you're bidding on and whether or not it's worth your resources or not. So if you have the option to kind of pick and choose between the jobs that you're estimating on and the jobs that you want to do work on because you've only got so many resources, then it's a good idea to pay attention to the revenue per man hour and your throughput to make sure that you're maximizing the revenue for your resources. So hopefully that makes sense. So there's a question, if you could somehow get your charge out rate from QuickBooks. You might be able to do that if you're charging anyone by the hour. Another spot would be just an LMN if what you're bidding at in your item catalog in the labor section. So you could look at the different labor rates that you've got set up in your LMN account, figure out the average, and enter that one in there too. So thank you for the question there. Let's see. So the other thing I wanted to show everybody here is where you can see this information. So it's great that it's in your budget, but a question usually comes up with, how does that help me with estimating? Do I have to remember my revenue per man hour? And the answer is we actually show that to you in the analysis section of the estimate. So just gonna jump over to an estimate real quick here. And if I go into the estimate to the analysis section, again, I'll see my budget revenue per hour. This is using a different budget than the one, this is using a profitable budget than the one I just showed. And this is what this estimate is bringing in per hour. So at a quick glance, we can see just how profitable or how good an estimate could be. Again, paying special attention to the throughput as well. But again, the reason for this and comparing those two is if I'm not hitting that on average, it's going to be really hard to hit my sales goal. And if I do a lot of estimates where I'm way under what my budget revenue per hour is, then it's very unlikely that you'll hit your sales goal in the budget. So it's really a good number to pay attention to help you maximize your revenue and help you meet your sales goal in your budget. Let's see, so that's the analysis section in your budget. So I'll switch back there just to bring that up. And then I'll see if there's any other questions that anybody has, happy to answer those. So another question, what's an average revenue per man hour that we should be seeing? That's a really good question. So that sort of depends on the mix of work that you do, of course. So typically, what we see is about, for design builds, anywhere from like 80 to 140 an hour revenue per hour. Again, that's going to include equipment, material, and labor costs. So higher for design build because of the material as well. That's bringing in additional revenue. So 80 to 140 there. And on the maintenance side, you're probably looking at more closer to 40 to 65. Of course, that's going to depend on your market. It's going to depend on your brand, how long you've been in business for. Can you charge a premium? The type of clientele you have, things like that. But hopefully, that range helps answer that question. Let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, so not really related to the analysis section, but someone's asking why the wage has 2 percentages. So that's a good question. And the reason is, and we show the higher percentage here, but that's just because the first percentage that you see, the 31.5, doesn't include labor burden, and the 37.7% does include your labor burden. So labor burden being the payroll costs, payroll taxes that you pay on your employees, workers' comp, that sort of thing. Let's see. So if there's no other questions, I thank you for joining me today on the webinar. I just have some additional points to show you here. So again, as a reminder, we do have a form section in your Element account where there's tons of information on health and safety documents, company policies and procedures, over 700 forms and processes available that you can download for free in Word and Excel files. So you can change those processes to meet your own company's processes. We have our LMN user group, so Facebook user group, LinkedIn user group if you want to ask your peers or ask our network of LMN members any questions. Doesn't have to be about LMN, perhaps just on purchasing equipment or any questions that you've got there that you want to connect with other members on. It's a great place to do that and get feedback from other people in the industry. And then, of course, we've got tons of training options available for you. We've got our Element Academy online, great tool to use to learn everything you need to know about LMN. We've got, again, dedicated account reps to help you out, get up and running, one-on-one support there. We also offer that fast track program that I mentioned earlier if anyone's interested in that. And then we've got virtual workshops and free webinars like the one that we've got coming up tomorrow with LMN CEO Mark Bradley on improving the accuracy, profitability, and speed at which you can estimate your maintenance estimates, which is going to be a new 4-part series that Mark's putting on for the next couple of weeks. So make sure you check that one out as well. And you can find all of our resources over at golmn.com/resources. And of course, any questions on this, or if you're interested in a budget review or any of that stuff, you can always email our support team at support@golmn.com or reach out to us on live chat. So thanks everybody for joining today. I hope that was helpful. And any additional questions, just let us know. Have a great Monday.